welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Ashutosh and we are back with more conversations. On behalf of the Economic Times, I welcome you all as we talk about the rush for infrastructure growth in Uttar Pradesh. Fresh wheels for growth in Uttar Pradesh. The connectivity in the state could take a quantum leap if these projects were to take off. There have been quite a few announcements, and I'm sure you've been keeping track of some of them, if not all. So why is this topic so important? Well, if India's fourth largest state with over 20 crore people, that's 200 million people, more than that. If that state can be turned around and increasingly made more business friendly with every passing year, it could open up huge opportunities for businesses and for the people of the state. So if roads, airports, rail networks, along with the multimodal connectivity that is being planned, if all of that could be expanded and executed in a time-bound manner, the state could be presented to investors as a great place to do business. New opportunities for local businesses could come up, and the ambitious one district, one product, or remember the ODOP program, that could take off, giving inclusive growth opportunities for millions in the state. Now that's about you to imagine. But how good is this idea? I'm so reminded of an old dictum in the stock markets. First, and here's how it goes. First, change the sentiment. It will be followed by liquidity before the long-term fundamentals can change. Put this dictum in place and you'll see some of that happening right now. Over the last few years, the government has tried to change the sentiment of the people with a slew of announcements. And that's been around the infrastructure projects, airports, railways, roads, more. Remember the number of highways that have been announced? The investor summit in the state has seen a promise for investments. The question now is, will the capital come in and create public assets that can change the fundamentals of the state? UP government wants the state to be a 1 trillion economy. So, if I may say, it's a $1 trillion question. Will the fundamentals change? Will the state change? So to discuss all this, I have a very stellar set of people joining. Let me first introduce them. Mr. Sanjay Gulati, he's EVP and Group Head Corporate Tax and Litigation at GMR Group. Mr. Arindam Guha, he is Partner, Government and Public Services Leader, Deloitte India. And Mr. Amit Singh, he'll be joining us as well. He's Associate Director at APCO Infratech. We were also supposed to have Mr. Awanish Awasthi. He's Additional Chief Secretary Home and CEO of UPEIDA, Government of Uttar Pradesh. But he had to pull out at the last minute, a little before we were going live, a little before that. But Mr. Awasthi gave us time and he could speak about the infrastructure push in the state. So, gentlemen, let me first get that conversation in, the conversation I had with Mr. Awasthi. Let's listen into the conversation and then we can move ahead. Thank you so much, Mr. Awasthi, for taking out the time to speak to us. Wanted to understand about so much happening in the state around aviation and all that. So first, tell us about the new airports that are coming up. 5 new airports have been announced in the state. How is it going to open up opportunities and the infrastructure that it helps build?
Well, Ashutosh, what I can say is that very clearly the entire state has seen a rush of infrastructure coming into place. I handle the expressways of the state as CEO of UPEIDA. And I can put it this way, if we can have a cargo plane land on a expressway. That is what we saw very recently when our Purvanchal Expressway got inaugurated by the Honorable Prime Minister. But in UP, we had earlier only the Lucknow and Varanasi airport as the international airports. Now, two more airports have come up at the international level. And further, very recently, a new airport has been proposed at Noida, which is called the Jaiwa Airport. And this airport has also, the foundation stone has been laid by the Honorable Prime Minister. This airport was planned long back, but very recently this airport has now been taken up. The bids had been finalized and Zurich Airport had won the bid, and they have now gone forward, and the progress has been made in this project. In fact, this international airport will be a hub for this entire area of Asia, and it will not just be a passenger hub, it will be a transport hub also, a logistic hub. So that is one of the big achievements of the state. The international airport at Kushinagar had also been planned long back, but it never came into being in a formal sense. Very recently, the Kushinagar International Airport was also, the inauguration was done by the Honorable Prime Minister. It will open the entire Buddhist circuit for this entire area. And if you would know that, well, with Sarnath in Varanasi, with Kushinagar, with Kapilvastu, with all these places of Buddhist importance, this Kushinagar airport would obviously make it possible for a large number of the devotees and travelers from the Southeast Asian region, even way up to Korea, Japan, to come to the state. So the Kushinagar airport too has been a milestone, and it has now also become an international airport. You would also know that Prayagraj, Allahabad, the flights have also started from Prayagraj and Allahabad. This airport was started just around when the Kumbh was on. So that again is a major achievement. And now from our state, 74 destinations are catered for by the various airports of our state. Further, I would like to tell you, an international airport is also planned at Ayodhya. We all know the developments of Ayodhya, and Ayodhya already had an airstrip earlier, which is now being expanded into a proper airport. An international airport will come up at Ayodhya. So that again is a major achievement. So we have seen an all-round growth in the airports of the state. There are any number of divisional headquarters which will now have airports, and such airports will cater to the regional connectivity of the state. And if there is traffic, they will also lead to connectivity from the state to the other parts of the country. I would like to give you an example of Gorakhpur, which is also an airport which was developed very recently. It had flights earlier, but now in the right earnest, the Gorakhpur airport, which is a civil terminal, has been made within the Air Force base. That airport has also seen tremendous, phenomenal growth in passenger traffic. And that again is an airport which has seen a lot of success in the recent past. So given all of this, large number of airports in UP are being taken up in the right earnest. UP is the most populous state of the country. UP provides a lot of skilled manpower all over the world. And of course, the high-end manpower also belongs to UP in the sense of engineers, doctors, their families all over the state, as well as outside the country also. So this is going to be a major boost to the airports in the state.
I was saying, with all this infrastructure development around airports, around the roads, how will the government ensure that the execution and completion is timely? Because that is one thing that India's infrastructure is known for, a little bit of delay in whatever is happening.
So basically what I would like to say is that the state has followed a very straightforward and transparent policy for acquiring, or rather buying, land from farmers. A simple thumb rule has been taken up where for every piece of land which is required for a public purpose, we directly negotiate with the farmers and we provide them 4 times the circle rate straight away. And this negotiation with the farmers leads to the registries being done, and the money is transferred through RTGS straight to the concerned landowner. So I can give you an example. The Ganga Expressway, which has very recently been, the foundation stone has been laid by the Honorable Prime Minister. 93% of the land for the Ganga Expressway worth 7,000 crores was done in 4 months despite COVID. And there was not a single problem, because everyone knows what is the formula, everyone knows how much land they have, and they get this money within 30 days of their doing the registry. So this is one very basic fact that we have taken forward. In the urban areas, you would know that Kashi Vishwanath Dham project has very recently been launched by the Honorable Prime Minister, the inauguration by the Honorable Prime Minister. Even in the thickly populated city areas of Varanasi, the simple formula of urban area of 2 times the value of land and the value of the building was provided to all the landowners as well as the house owners. And this entire process also was added with rehabilitation packages for people who are there. So very positive rehabilitation packages, very transparent policy, revenue officials being directly in touch with the farmers on the ground with no middlemen or no intermediaries in between, has led to land being acquired for every single project in the state in the right earnest. Whether it be expressways, whether it be the airports, whether it be irrigation projects, which had been stuck for quite some time. They again, this straightforward policy of buying land from the farmers with 4 times the rate in rural areas, 2 times the rate in urban areas has helped us a lot. And this policy of the state has been acclaimed all over the country, and we have really gone forward in the right earnest.
How have the linkages to businesses been designed so that products manufactured in the state can be taken to other markets, maybe outside the state, for the manufacturers or the producers to get the best prices?
So I would like to state first, the state government has provided a land bank to all the entrepreneurs here, and land availability has been made possible because no project can be implemented without the land being made available at attractive prices. That's one. The second thing that the government has done, it's brought out a slew of policies. For every sector, there is a new policy in place, so that the policy ensures that a seamless system is there for approvals. And thirdly, we have made what is called the new investment organization, Invest UP. So this investment organization essentially caters to all the entrepreneurs of the state, and this ensures that there is seamless approvals which are given to each of the new projects. This will ensure this single window clearance ensures that, say, if you want a fire clearance, that's all online. If you want any clearance from the local Nagar Nigam, it's also online. If you want a license for sulfur, it's all online. So all of these things have now become online. So the use of technology has further ensured that a transparent and a fast and reliable mechanism has been put in place. And the number of acts which were there to control such industries, most of them have been done away with. So that again has made UP as a very positive destination, a very attractive destination. A new scheme called the One District, One Product scheme has been launched. This One District, One Product provides a boost to the MSME, because every district now has a strong point. If you have a district which makes Zardozi, silk fabric, if you have Lucknow, which has chicken fabric. So all of these are being promoted in a very large fashion with training, with provision of tools. So all of this will further ensure that there is a boost to the MSME sector also. And incidentally, all of this has resulted in a growth of the exports from this sector in the range of about 28 to 30% on a year-to-year basis. So given all of that, we in UP have seen a very positive climate. We had investor summits being launched by the Honorable Prime Minister. So these investments, the MOUs have now got converted into actual work on the ground. And quite a few of these industries have also started production. So ultimately, if we see the scenario for UP, the ease of doing business index, which earlier showed us at way around 18 or 19. We jumped to 12th, and now we have jumped to the second position in the country, and we hope to reach the top position in the country in terms of getting our entrepreneurs to invest in the state. We have the defense corridor in UP. There were only two defense corridors, one in Tamil Nadu, one in UP. The UP defense corridor was absolute fresh greenfield, but the UP defense corridor has moved so fast that we have got the Bharat Dynamics Limited, which will make missiles. It's a CPSU of the Government of India, and DRDO, which is going to make BrahMos, being constructed within our state. A large number of these new weaponries will also get constructed in our state at Raebareli, the Kalashnikov rifles, which will be required for the armed forces and police forces. So a lot of movement has happened in the defense corridor sector also. And we hope to tap large-scale producers of defense equipment or defense in the area of, say, aircraft, helicopters, maybe even in the areas of high electronic areas like radars and all of this. So a lot of work has been done. We are fortunate to have the Honorable Prime Minister as one of the MPs of our state. We are fortunate to have the Defense Minister as the MP for Lucknow. So we are also fortunate to have our Chief Minister whose vision is such that we move fast. So within our state, we are getting all of these coordinated so that everything moves forward very fast. We are also an Express Pradesh. So this Express Pradesh will ensure that basic road connectivity is of the topmost quality. And as the Honorable Premium has launched a new project, which is called the PM Gati Shakti, where all the infrastructure works have to be synergized and brought together on a common platform, so that the roads, the optical fiber networks, the railways, the east-west corridors for the freight movement, the airports, all of these come on the same ground, and then ultimately leads to a very strong logistic network. So because ultimately in the near future, the logistic strength of the logistic network will ensure that the e-market, which is growing very fast in our country, will grow very fast.
Okay, so what is the message then for the entrepreneurs? You know, the government's message for the entrepreneurs who will be participating in this infrastructure development and the projects that are in the pipeline?
Well, the message for the entrepreneurs is that UP will be number one. And this message to the entrepreneurs is loud and clear. I am the Home Secretary of the state. We can state this also, that there has been drastic reduction in crime. Law and order has seen a drastic improvement within the state. So with a very good law and order situation, with strong infrastructure availability, with availability of land, with very transparent and positive policies, and a mechanism and a system where all of this gets done online through technology, will ensure that any entrepreneur, big or small, even if it is a startup or whether it is an MSME or a medium scale industry or a large industry, they will all come together and be partners within the state. With the large population that we have of trained manpower, very readily available manpower, with strong technical institutions also available within the state. So this entire synergy will ensure that we in UP will move forward in almost all areas which is possible. The only thing which we lack is a coastline. So we are an inbound state. Other than that, the sky is the limit, and we in the state will move fast to ensure that our state progresses, our state develops. We also have a target of a $1 trillion economy for Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh is now the second largest economy within the country, and we again hope to make it the largest economy within the country.
One small question in terms of the mindset change of the people, Mr. Awasthi, how does that change? How will that change to ensure that it is in sync with the growth numbers and the growth prospects that you're talking about?
The mindset change starts with basic motivation of our students. Mindset change happens if we have very strong educational policy. The mindset change happens if in every educational institution there is good teaching. It's in the hands of our youth to take our country and state forward. If our youth are trained well, they are provided good education, quality education, if they are empowered with technology, then the country will move forward. UP has the largest youth population within the country. We in India have the largest youth population within the world. That is where the strength lies. That is where the younger generation needs to push to take our country forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Awasthi, for taking out the time. We really appreciate your taking out the time.
And I'm so very thankful for ET to have been provided me this opportunity. I once again would like to repeat that we are in Express Pradesh. We are moving in the right direction at topmost speed to ensure that the last person in our state gets the benefit of the schemes of the government, and we all move together as one state, one country.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's wonderful to hear from the UP Home Secretary about the way the government is going about trying to build on the infrastructure opportunity for the state. Very interesting times where this conversation is happening, because investments in such times, a little tough time for business as well. So thank you, gentlemen, for staying on and listening to the conversation so patiently. Let's start with the questions. First to you, Arindam. We've heard from the Home Secretary as he spelled out the details. Can I start with a broad question? How does all the announcements that we've heard, that change the perception of a state as a place to do business?
Sure. Thanks, Ashutosh, first for having me on this show. Now, I think, there are 2-3 things which have happened. One is, you would have noticed that many of these announcements are for projects which have almost been completed or have been launched. So, for example, the Purvanchal Expressway is almost ready. It's been commissioned, and it took about 4 years to be commissioned. It's almost ready. The Bundelkhand Expressway, I think, is yet to be completed, but it would be fair to say that the percentage of completion is reasonable. Now, that's the part about the hard infrastructure, and it's not only about the expressways. I think what we are also seeing quite clearly is that the state seems to be following a very conscious strategy of even identifying land parcels alongside the expressways. Because it's the expressway is the enabler. And all of us know that infrastructure investments have quite a reasonable multiplier of around 2 to 2.5 times the regional GDP. Now, that multiplier does not get achieved if industrial activity does not step up to leverage the expressway, which is where the land parcels, which Mr. Awasthi was referring to, becomes very important. If you look at just these 2 expressways, Purvanchal and Bundelkhand, I think around 9,000 hectares of land has also been identified alongside these expressways. These are over and above the industrial parks which are already there in the state. So I think what's happening is the projects are getting commissioned, they're getting completed. Activities are happening across sectors. It's not only about the expressways. It's about the softer elements of investment climate. The state today has a single window mechanism which they call Nivesh Mitra. And many of the private sector investors have tested it out. This particular ease of doing business assessment, which DPIIT on behalf of the Government of India conducts every year, I think the last assessment was probably in 2019, for which the results were published. And UP came out second. And you see the major difference in these assessments as they have moved over the years, is that today a significant part of the ranking is based on investor feedback. It's not only about policies which have been notified or paper documents which are provided or testing of the online platforms. It's actual feedback from the investor. So I think the mindset change will probably happen because people are seeing action on the ground. And they're seeing developments across sectors. It's not only physical infrastructure, but it's hopefully cascading down. I'll talk about a few examples later.
Sure.
but it's cascading down in the form of anchor investments coming into the state.
Sure. Okay, so connectivity, one of the words we heard from the Home Secretary was also about the connectivity, the emphasis on connectivity. So Sanjay, how does that help change the opportunity for companies? And how is, how can this be followed up so that the government and companies can possibly work together, or if I may say so, work together better?
I think one of the interesting thing what Mr. Awasthi has said, the creation of the large infrastructure and the speed at which the infrastructure is being created, and as rightly explained by Mr. Arindam, this is going to really bring a change. And Uttar Pradesh has a very interesting geography and geographical advantage and a locational advantage. So considering that advantage, I think Uttar Pradesh can act as a very strong economic corridor. So with this kind of a economic corridor coming in, connect with a very capital intensive infrastructure being made available across the length and breadth of the state, I think will really create opportunities for the manufacturing supply chain infrastructure. And it creates those UP as a hub for supply chain for the region. And maybe the region I say is the Southeast Asia region, or where we are already competing with China. And Uttar Pradesh having that large size, in its size, it's so vast that that particular opportunity can be tapped. And therefore, Uttar Pradesh can really strongly become a very good economic corridor. And I think industry can really leverage, and it is so adjacent to the national capital region, which is another advantage for Uttar Pradesh. So considering all that, and if this pace of development happens and this transformation happens in next 4 years or 5 years, where in airports, also new airports are coming in, large size of air cargo hubs are created alongside the airports, and all those MRO facilities are created, advanced MRO facility, manufacturing of aircrafts, manufacturing of air maintenance systems and technology, and R&D centers for all of them. I think all that is a very good combination for the development of an economic corridor, which we call it, and I think that will be a success in time to come.
Okay, now, since Arindam, you spoke about the anchor investors, one example possibly is the defense corridor that is coming up, and they're trying to also have that feed into or into one of the expressway. So how can this opportunity be multiplied? We're seeing this anchor investor from the government side. I'm sure there'll be some companies that might be interested. What key factors would they be looking at?
Yeah, I think the first issue which needs to be addressed, which what we are seeing in all these economic corridors or industrial corridors, is that in the initial stages, typically the government has to play the role of providing risk capital. Now, in case of UP, they have an advantage because they already have the ordnance factories, about 3-4 of them already present in the state. Whether it's Kanpur, there are 2-3 other locations. HAL, which, as all of us know, is a public sector unit, which is into defense manufacturing of smaller aircraft, etc. They have also been in the state. And then we heard Mr. Awasthi talk about the DRDO unit and a couple of other government units. Because let's understand one thing, defense manufacturing in our country, the government PSUs are going to have a significant role because of security concerns. And the private investors who come in, the larger OEMs who are being targeted as anchor investors, they would only come in many of the cases, they would come in through joint ventures. And there would be specific commitments around technology transfer so that we become Atmanirbhar. And that is exactly what is happening here. So the initial investments The government PSUs are being leveraged to expand their product portfolio through technology collaborations, etc. And what we understand is that there are conversations ongoing with some of the large OEMs as well. So I think that's the kind of traction which is being attempted to be created. And of course, what is a given in all this is that you need state-of-art connectivity infrastructure. You need state-of-art manufacturing clusters. And also what you need is skilled people. So all the enablers in terms of land, in terms of state-of-art urban facilities, physical connectivity, these are all taken as a given. So I think those are the other areas which probably need to be focused on to make this a success.
And add on to that,
Sure.
the inclusive policy framework. The inclusive policy framework, if made available, I think will certainly attract foreign direct investment and also boost the domestic investment.
Okay, so Sanjay, also since we're talking about how tax incentives, since given your your worldview, your perspective, can you give a sense of how tax incentives could be made an enabler? What would typically, and the reason I think you're very well placed to answer this question in your role in a company which has so many investments in different parts of infrastructure, whether roads, airports, power, and more, what would a company like that look at?
See, a company with a large infrastructure, which requires a large, what we are looking at is the investment in infrastructure, and which is, we all know, is capital intensive and huge capital is required. So when there is a investment which is committed by any entrepreneur, it is expected that there is a return on that investment. Now, there is a gestation period for that return on investment when you enter into a new market or a new place where you don't have an existing ecosystem, but you create an ecosystem. So there you have to put larger share of capital investment to develop that ecosystem. Now, having said that, there is how the state can support, how the government can support, and how the financial institutions which enable this kind of soft funding to those infrastructure projects which requires significant investment into bringing that world-class airports or world-class railway stations or world-class logistics hub or supply chain hub and warehouse, creation of warehouses, etc. So overnight, if we need to create them, or in a shorter span of time, 3 to 4 years, that means there is requirement of huge capital inflow. Now, a capital inflow, if is given in the form of subsidized at a subsidized interest rate, I think could lead to the attraction for the participants to come over, investors to come over here and try to place themselves into a long haul journey of staying in the state and creating that state world-class infrastructure, like we did. GMR Group did in Delhi, they created in Hyderabad, and they're creating world-class airports along with Aerocity, and which caters to the economic factors of whether it is for healthcare, whether it is for media and technology and others at one place. And everybody can operate from that world-class facilities. So one of the suggestion I have is that airports can be created as tax-free zones on the lines of either Gift City, create that fintech center, you create economic center, and you create those, attract or invite those aviation related industries to come up, like setting up, as I mentioned earlier, that MRO facilities can be set up, large MRO facilities can be set up, manufacturing of aircraft components can be set up, R&D centers can be set up, and so on and so forth, which basically enable exports, which enables development of domestic infrastructure and which enables growth of the allied industries alongside. So if that is made as a tax-free zone, I think it will, create an ease of international trade and as well as domestic trade.
Also, since you referred to it very briefly, Arindam, the hard and the soft part of it. The hard part we spoke about, you also referred to the soft part of it. How can that be a multiplier? Again, we're talking for a state of massive size. I mean, 240 million people almost. And so there is a huge opportunity that the people would like to leverage. How can that be developed?
Yeah. I think
sorry.
there are two parts to this. One is for the investors, okay, because they are, if you look at them, they're the G2B part of the interactions. Government to business interactions is what they fall under. Now there, I think the expectation is, and I think Uttar Pradesh has really taken some rapid strides towards that, along with many other states. What we refer to today as an online single window solution. Because any unit which has to set up operations in a particular state, they typically need around 25 to 27 specific approvals, whether they are from the State Pollution Control Board, from the Factories Department, from the Labor Department, from the Register of Companies. It's a plethora of approvals which have to be taken from the central and state government agencies. And naturally, the expectation is that you should not have to run from pillar to post to get these approvals. So I think what many of the leading states have done today is that they have set up an online platform. In case of UP, it's called Nivesh Mitra, where through a common application form, you provide most of the data, beyond which you may need to provide some specific data to specific agencies. But even that happens online. So if you need to provide a building plan for approval, for example, that's an added document over the common application form. Similarly, there may need to be some documents to be provided additionally. But the expectation is that these submissions happen electronically. There is no need for a physical visit to the concerned government agency. And I think over time, what we have seen in many of the leading industrial parks and the industrial cities is that these approvals should be provided at the park level itself. The investor doesn't want to know how it's getting processed at the back end. Whichever district the investor sets up an unit in, he should have a common interface in terms of the technology platform like Nivesh Mitra. He does not care whether the approval goes to a head office of a particular agency or it gets approved at the district level itself. So I think that's how the softer elements become extremely important. And I think we heard Mr. Awasthi talk about rationalization of laws, because that is happening at the central as well as the state level. In terms of, we have a plethora of laws and many of the provisions are no longer applicable because either technology has changed or the industry context has changed. So, and when they fall under state jurisdiction, then the state government has to take the initiative of rationalizing the laws. And automatically what happens is the investment approvals get rationalized.
Sure.
So I think that's the crux of the software elements.
So there are also some questions coming in because some people who are online and they are watching on various platforms, they have this question. This one comes from Amit, and I'll read out his question. How can the skills be developed so that local people can make use of the opportunity? This is from Amit in Mumbai. If Sanjay, would you like to go for this?
Yeah, thank you. So I think when we talk about expansion and when we talk about inclusive growth, and one of that element is the development of skills for the locals. And that happens if we also encourage setting up of large skill development centers focused to a particular industry. And that's how, that whole, as we were talking about, when we create a 360-degree ecosystem for a particular industry to come up, there is also a strong need for the right skill set. And that skill set is developed in parallel. So while we see aviation, we have seen aviation sector. Now there are specialized courses in the aviation sector for aviation management, or you name it, whether for how do you handle ground handling systems, how do you handle aircraft maintenance, how do you handle ATC, how do you handle the other aspects of the airport operations. The airport management diploma is given. Now, these kind of things are started coming. The focused skill-based, education system is the need of the hour. And I think government has also recognized it. And for the last couple of years, in many states, this particular, initiative has taken place and it has benefited. And one example of the past, my assignment I can give you, that the retail industry, wherever the stores were open, the large size stores were open, 80 to 90% of the local people were hired. They were trained on the job. And those students, whether they were class 10 student or class students who have completed 12th, and thereafter they came and they wanted to work, they were trained for that particular job. And, they shined very well. And in the state of UP, we had stores, and, and we employed almost 500 to 600 people in one particular store. So that's how, every sector has demonstrated, hospitality industry has demonstrated, how the skill is important, and they hire locals. So there is a need for, and there is already in place, but there need to be an augmentation of those skill development centers, and education curriculum need to be further upgraded in the state universities as well as the private universities. Both have to come together and participate in that.
Okay, there are more questions. Looks like skilling is important for people, because there seems to be another one. This one's Krishna, who says, how can private sector and government work together for skilling people for tomorrow? Arindam, would you like to take that? Because something like what you've been talking about.
Sure, Ashutosh. So I think, let me give you an example. When I think about 2-3 years back, or probably slightly more, India was targeting, assembly and manufacturing of mobile phones in the country for some of the large global manufacturers. We saw some large facilities come up in a couple of the southern states, in one particular state in particular. I'm not taking names because, it's fairly obvious. What we found was that the manufacturer, it was not the mobile phone brand as such, but the subcontractor who manufactures those mobile phones. The agreement with the state government was that it would go for large scale skilling of the local population, so that they could, successfully carry out the assembly of those phones in India, because there were significant imports and there was a particular assembly operation which was largely automated, and it was a process operation. So there were particular skills to be imparted. And the other, I would say, the other silver lining to it was that most of the workforce were women. So I think that's at the ground level, that's how it can happen, in terms of the anchor investor and the government working together, so that the anchor investor, as part of his investment, for which he's provided fiscal incentives by the state government, they themselves get to run a sort of a finishing school so that they get a ready workforce. Now, at the institutional level, I think what this implies, Ashutosh, is that, it's not about one department in the state government which needs to achieve that the end results of this network of expressways is achieved, because the end result is economic growth and inclusive economic growth. The UPEIDA needs to, I'm sure they're doing that, collaborate and plan jointly with the skilling department in the state, the education, department, because in the medium term, these need to be also ingrained into the curriculum. And the National Education Policy 2020 allows for that today, the policy which was notified last year. So I think it's going to be a plethora of about 3-4 key departments of the government, whether it's UPEIDA, whether it's UP Expressway Development Authority, they need to come together at the time the investment is getting planned, so that the local population can be trained and considered for the jobs which are on offer. And just one additional point, if I may, we have only been discussing very, very high-tech industries till now. So we have been talking about defense, corridor, etc. But I think the other beneficiary of this economic activity would be even the agro sector. Because in UP, we have seen that food processing investment has been one of the key contributors over the last 2-3 years, and very logically so, because they have some competitive advantage in terms of being the largest producer of not only wheat, but even horticulture, sugar. They have significant production. So we have seen some large anchor investors setting up shop in the state. And for them, they would need 2 levels of processing. One is, of course, tertiary processing, which they are themselves setting up the units for. But they would also need an element of farm gate processing, which would need to happen through the self-help groups of the farmers. And that's where some skilling activity would definitely need to be undertaken. So I think we are talking about an inclusive approach whereby all sections, all occupations, all sectors benefit from this upgrading of physical infrastructure.
Okay.
I would like to add, that is where GMR has contributed by setting up our institutions, where we provide this skill development for the aviation sector. And we provide skill development through our CSR initiative in many parts of the country, where local population is skilled to either join and become part of our businesses where we are operating our businesses, be it in infrastructure, be it in airports or aviation and so on. So the relevant specific skill-based institutions are being created, and we offer that direct skill development programs.
Okay, so I'll just read out, there's a comment from a gentleman, Group Captain V.K. Chaturvedi. He's a retired Indian Air Force officer. So he's made this comment. He says, Madhya Pradesh has also gone ahead with defense corridor on Atal Pragati Path Expressway coming up from Bhind, Gwalior, Shivpuri and ahead. This makes a necklace around the Jhansi-Agra belt. 2 adjoining defense corridors at UP and MP can share research lab and DRDO and test lab facilities requisite for defense equipment military grade testing. Promoting both corridors will be in the interest of the nation. So he's not had a question, but this is the point he's making. So basically integrating the integrated approach, which somewhat we've heard so far from the government. Sanjay, one more question I have about this. How can, or whether this can, and in fact, I'd ask you as well, Arindam, too, but first to Sanjay, how can the approach that UP is taking be a model for some other states as well, at least the larger ones?
I think the very good point is the positive approach. The speed at which the government intends to implement projects is a very, very positive and welcome step. And that is where it is very encouraging the way Mr. Awasthi explained the policy reformations and policy inclusive policy to bring private participation along with the public sector participation. I think it will really support the growth of fast-paced growth of the state. And it's possible.
Okay, that's pretty positive to hear. Arindam, the same question to you. Can it become a model? And can it also, if I may add, can it also learn from some of the good practices at other states?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Ashutosh. That's exactly what is happening. If you take a closer look at some of the defined industrial corridors in our country, whether it's the DMI-CDC or the Bangalore-Chennai Industrial Corridor, or the East Coast Economic Corridor, which stretches from Tamil Nadu right up to the Bangladesh border. This is exactly what is being attempted. Create a strong infrastructure spine or a backbone, whether it's a road network, a railway network with evacuation points in the form of ports, airports, etc. That's one component of the industrial corridor. The second component are what are being called the nodes, which are a combination of industrial parks and urban centers, because one cannot thrive without the other. Where will the workforce stay if there is no upgraded urban center in proximity to the industrial park? So this is the model which is being attempted. I think UP has taken a bold step because all states face this problem. You see, if you look at our country, you'll find that many of the states have only one or two cities which are so-called thriving in terms of economic activity. But inevitably, there's a part of the state where infrastructure is not up to state or up to grade. And the problem is the private sector doesn't want to involve or invest in that particular area. Because there is no urban center. There are no evacuation points in terms of airports, or the road network is not up to speed. And there is no escaping it, but the government investment has got to step up in those areas, provide the risk capital, and then the private sector will step in. This is exactly what is happening in UP. If you look at Purvanchal Expressway, if you look at Bundelkhand Expressway, I presume it's the same strategy where government creates an enabling infrastructure, thereby expecting that on the land parcels which are part of that infrastructure, which have the potential to benefit from that infrastructure, that's where private investment comes in.
Okay, very interesting, because I was just going to go to the next point also, Sanjay. You may have, you will be very well positioned to talk about this. The spin-off benefits of creating a greenfield airport in Hyderabad. If you could give some details about the learnings from there, how could things be done right, and how could things be improved from what we saw more than 10 years ago? The airport was built in the first decade of the millennium.
Yeah, that's right. So I think the very first step is that you have to identify what is the need of that particular place. So when we created that infrastructure, airport infrastructure, and it is little away from the city as against the old airport, and there were apprehensions of how that will have a connectivity, and then they created the overbridge and connecting almost 20 kilometers overbridge, and connected the urban center with the airport, and created that seamless travel time, and reduce the time to reach the airport. That is one part of it. The economic benefit which has been received by setting up that infrastructure is by having an exclusive economic zone for aviation related businesses, for fulfillment centers, for creating logistics park, and so on. So all that actually created the economic benefit. And now we are also coming up with the largest AeroCity, where, as I mentioned earlier, that it is an inclusive place for doing a business. So we are creating a dedicated infrastructure for hospitality, education. We have manufacturing hubs, logistics park, and healthcare. All that is coming up and working from that particular AeroCity. So that is how it creates that economic thrust and economic opportunities, and that is how the ecosystem in that place develops.
For people, my last question to you, Arindam, for people who track the way things are unfolding in Uttar Pradesh, or maybe in other states as well, it need not be just about Uttar Pradesh, specific to this, what you're seeing unfolding in the state, what should they be watching out for? Where could the economic activity be taking off in the next few months and maybe a year or two?
Well, I think, they probably, what I'm expecting is we need to closely track the sectors where the state has competitive advantages. We talked about food processing. There's an element of textiles in the form of silk and some other materials as well. Then, of course, defense, because that's a central initiative on which the state is riding on. So first is these sectors, in addition to, some of the other conventional sectors like even agro-processing, where not all the agro products may be conducive for food processing, but nevertheless, farm gate infrastructure and better linkage through physical connectivity to the wholesale markets. Probably that could lead to a lot of positive economic benefits. And I think the things to carefully focus on beyond what is happening in the state today, those would also be very important, is the last mile connectivity. Because as I was sharing before, last mile connectivity to the industrial parks is very important from the highways. That typically accounts for about 30% of the supply chain costs. So those also have to be debottlenecked. And that is typically within the purview of the city corporation or the public works department, which constructs the roads, etc. And there's an element of, financial constraint there as well, which needs to be addressed. And of course, upgrading the supporting cities so that the workforce, which is deployed in these industrial parks, have got proper residential and commercial amenities. And it doesn't become a question of not being able, the anchor investors, not being able to attract the right quality of people. So there are these safeguards and focus areas, but I think, till now the progress has really been exceptional, if I may say so.
Okay, very important point that you've ended on, Arindam, because ultimately it's about the people. So if the civic infrastructure, if the hospitals, the schools, and the related infrastructure is not there, the right set of people who could really be the multipliers, they will be missing. So very interesting point that you've left. So quite a bit for the state to do, some bit that they may have done. So perhaps, Sanjay, would you like to add a little bit about how housing could get a fillip? And because there are more than 200 industries that feed into the housing sector. So that itself could be a new multiplier.
Sorry, I missed to
hear. I was saying housing, that's what Arindam referred to. That could be a multiplier because so many industries, the B2B industry, the steel, cement, and so many more, they feed into the housing sector.
Yeah, I think it's one of the very known factor that where economic activity is, the home is the need. So the workforce basically comes around that. And when we create that corridor, economic corridor, and in each industrial park or industrial belt, you have that integrated township that will support the growth of the housing sector as well. And currently there is a availability of innovation and there is availability of technology, and I think that can really integrate.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us and this interesting conversation. Thanks indeed for being with us. What we can do is we can also pose for a group picture because we couldn't take it one. If you can put your best smile and Arindam, if I may request you, I'm sorry, if I can request you. Yeah, thank you so much. So a smile and we'll take the picture and so that we have it for our posterity. Unfortunately, in these times, can't do it in person. Okay, that should take care of it. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
I'd love to end on a note or end with some words that I used earlier. And I just go back to the stock markets and how the markets see it. They first talk of sentiment, then they talk of liquidity, and then they talk of fundamentals. What UP perhaps is trying to do is change the sentiment, change the way people perceive the state. That's the sentiment part of it. They're looking for the liquidity or the capital to build the infrastructure. And ultimately, that could change the face of the state or the fundamentals of the state. So hopefully, this is a long quest ahead, and hopefully the state will change along with the people. Thank you so much for joining us and talking about this interesting conversation. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time as well.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.